My friends, I want to share with you a beautiful book this evening. It's a hard book. It's a beautiful book though, and it's a book of great beauty, and it's by one of the best authors I've ever read. She writes books like picture books. She writes books for middle school kids. She writes books for teenagers. She writes books for adults. She's one of my most favorite writers. Every time a new book comes out from Jacqueline Woodson, that's her name, I buy it because that's how good she is. I work in a library and I buy the audiobook. I buy it. Jacqueline Woodson. I think Harbor Me is her latest, but I'm not sure. She recently won the National Book Award for Brown Girl Dreaming. Fantastic. I mean, she's won the Newbery. This one here is a Newbery honor book right here. This one is called Showway. Jacqueline Woodson, and it's her family story. It's going to talk about these freedom quilts. It's just beautiful, beautiful. And I'm going to put links to this information. You'll see it. It's illustrated by Hudson Talbot, and she writes poetry, so it's poetic. This is an awesome book. When Suni's great-grandma was 7, she was sold from the Virginia land to a plantation in South Carolina without her ma or pa, but with some muslin her ma had given her, and 2 needles she got from the big house, and thread she dyed bright red with berries from the chokecherry tree. In South Carolina, Big Mama raised Suni's great-grandma, raised most of the slave children on that large patch of land. At night, Big Mama told the children stories she'd tell in a whisper about children growing up and getting themselves free. And the children leaned in and listened real hard. And in the daytime, when there was some few minutes for a slave to rest a bit, Big Mama taught Suni's great-grandma to sew colored thread into stars and moons and roads. And these slave children grew up and followed those stars and moons and roads late in the night, a piece of quilt and the true moon leading them. Years passed, Big Mama moved on to the next world. And Suni's great-grandma grew up and jumped broom with a young man named Ensler. Had herself a baby girl and named that child Matthias May. And she loved that baby up so, yes, she loved that baby up. And one day, Matthias May would be Suni's grandma, but not for a long time yet. In the meantime, she learned to sew. Beautiful girl child learned to sew. When Matthias May was 7, she got sold away, took a star from her mama's blanket, took a little piece of the road, pressed it to her face when she wanted to remember back home, held it to her heart to feel back home, got herself a piece of muslin and some thread somewhere and kept up her sewing, sewed so fine that she was making clothes for everyone in the big house and the slaves too. And at night, she sewed stars and moons and roads, tiny patch pieces of stars and moons and roads. Slaves whispered what no one was allowed to say, that Matthias knew how to make a showway. Came to her when they needed to talk, came to her for the stories of brave people, came to her for the patch pieces just before they disappeared into the night. But Matthias May stayed on and grew tall and straight-boned and jumped broom with another slave. That slave was killed running off to the north side of the war months before he got to meet his baby, a girl child who was born free that same year, 1863. History went and lost her name. Years later, Suni came. Suni's mama held her up in the moonlit night, showed her the stars, the moon, whispered into her ear, "There's a road, girl, there's a road." Loved that Suni up so. Yes, she loved that Suni up. Suni and her mama stayed on the land they'd always known, picking cotton for little pay and a little piece of ground to farm, called that land home. Stayed on with other people, none of them slaves anymore. Hard work making a life from pink day to blue-black night, but it was a free life just the same. And when the day was finally over, wasn't hard to find a thing or two to smile about. At night, they cut and sewed, strange lines and odd designs. People said about Suni, that child, she could find some beauty in so many things. When Suni was 7, she was tall and straight-boned, like her mama. She took in wash with her mama, sewed stars on patch pieces, sewed stars and moons and roads, sewed fields and rivers and trees, patched the pieces together for her mama to sell come market day. Called those quilts Trail to the North. Called the quilts Show Way. Didn't much need that secret trail to the north anymore, but started living well off the money those quilts brought in. Sewed those quilts to live, sewed those quilts to remember, and though some could book read, most could not, stars and moons and roads. Picture reading was what they'd always known. Some mornings, Suni looked out over the fields of cotton and dreamed of a place to call her own. Married a man named Walter Scott, who owned a bit of land in Anderson, South Carolina, had herself a baby girl, named that girl child Georgiana, loved that baby up so, they loved that baby up. Georgiana, who grew tall and straight-boned and free, picked out words from her mama's Bible by 3, reading by oil lamp light at age 5. People say about Georgiana, she always had a book in her hand. Grew up to teach school at a small school in Anderson. Had herself 2 girls at once, named them Caroline and Anne. Loved those babies up so, yes, they loved those babies up. And Caroline and Anne grew up straight and tall and straight-boned and turned 7, walking in a line to change the laws that kept black people and white people living separate. They were a little bit scared, so sometimes, yes, but pinned inside their dresses were show-way patches that Grandma Suni had given them. And something about those patches made Scared hang his mean old head and walk away. Anne grew up writing poems, and sometimes she made the poems into songs. Caroline stitched those songs into art that brought people bought to hang up on their walls. Anne had me, and Mama loved this baby up. Yes, she loved this baby up. And when I was 7, I didn't have to work in a field or walk in any freedom lines, but I still read like Georgiana and wrote like Anne. And when the words were slow coming in, I sewed stars and moons and roads into quilts and curtains and cloths, because Mama said all the stuff that happened before you were born is your own kind of show way. There's a road, girl, my mama said. There is a road. And I grew up tall and straight-boned, writing every day, and the words became books that told the stories of many people's show ways. Had a baby and named that child Toshi Georgina. Love that Toshi up. Yes, I love that Toshi up. So some mornings I start all over, holding tight to little Toshi. I whisper a story that came before her. Now, Sony was your great-great-grandma. And when Suni's great-grandma was 7. And you can see, you can't see it, but you can see in the quilt like all these different people who came before Toshi. Toshi's a kid. And Toshi's mama is Jacqueline Woodson, this woman right here, who wrote these books and so many more. And I thank you for sharing that, for allowing me to share that with you. And you, I hope that you have your own show way that helps you to move ahead and to keep on going. Because I know you all have incredible gifts that you're sharing and continuing to share with others, and that you're making your way too. We're all making our way, right? And we're all making our way to a day when we make it, when it's just as easy, just as difficult for me to make a way, and someone with a different color skin than I have to make a way, when it's the same. Thank you, my friends. You kiss your beautiful brain, kiss your loving heart, look in the mirror, say, hey, good looking. I'll give you more information about these kind of quilts and about Jacqueline Woodson. Check it out.